Here's what nobody tells you about grief. You can do every single thing right and still feel like you're failing at it. Today, I'm talking about complex grief, what it is, how it's different, and giving you 7 strategies that actually help when grief gets stuck. I'm Dr. Therese, and welcome to Checking In, the podcast for high achievers who want to stop surviving and start actually loving their lives. If you are the kind of person who looks like you have it all together while you are quietly exhausted, this podcast is for you. We're not just managing stress, we're talking about the stuff that keeps you stuck. And I'm giving you real tools to create a life that you hopefully never want to escape from. So here's the thing about complex grief. I know this one personally. After my brother died by suicide, I dealt with my grief by basically not dealing with it at all. I didn't go to therapy for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't talk about it much. Instead, I tried to focus on work and staying busy. And here's the spoiler, that doesn't work very well. Before we dive in much further, just a quick note. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, this episode is not a quick fix and isn't a replacement for professional support. Please consider contacting 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is available 24/7. I've also included additional resources in the show notes, and I hope that you remember you deserve care. So now, if you're ready to stop performing your way through grief and learn how to actually carry it, let's get into it. But first, remember to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss next week's episode, which is our season's finale, where we're pulling everything together. Before we get into the tips, let's take a couple deep breaths together. If this feels good for you, stay with me. If not, feel free to skip ahead. Take a deep inhale in through your nose and out through your mouth. One more time, in through your nose. And a nice slow exhale. Notice if you're carrying any tension anywhere, your jaw, your shoulders, your chest, and see if you can soften just a little bit. Okay, let's talk about complex grief. First, let's talk about what complex grief actually is, because I think that so often we assume that grief is just about death or sadness, but grief is actually about loss of any kind that fundamentally changes who you are. And complex grief, think of it this way. Typical grief is like a single layer cake. It's painful, it's heavy, it's one thing that you're carrying. Complex grief, though, is like a layer cake. It's grief stacked on top of grief, stacked on top of shame, on top of managing other people's reactions, stacked on top of trauma. It's when loss gets complicated by circumstances that make it even harder to process. While no form of grief is ever easy, typical grief tends to have a natural rhythm. You feel the pain, you let yourself feel it, you talk about the person or what you lost, and you gradually integrate that loss into your new life. The waves of grief get further apart over time, and you can imagine a future even while you're sad about what you lost. You're moving through it. Complex grief is when you get stuck, when the grief doesn't soften over time. In fact, it can intensify or stay exactly as raw as it was months or years ago. And here's where high achievers get it wrong when it comes to handling their complex grief. They think that if they just work hard enough at their grieving, they'll graduate from it faster. But grief isn't a performance review. There's no gold star for finishing ahead of schedule. Let me give you some examples of what makes grief complex. Think about when someone dies by suicide or overdose. Suddenly, you're not just grieving, you're managing everyone else's discomfort. When someone asks you how they died, you're calculating whether you can say the actual truth or whether you need to say something vague. So there's grief there, plus there's shame and managing other people's expectations. Or what about leaving an abusive relationship? You're grieving the person you thought they were, the future you'd imagined, the version of yourself you lost while trying to make it work. But when people find out it was abusive, they say, oh, you should be relieved that it's over. They don't understand you can be grateful you left and still be completely devastated. Or losing a job central to your identity. People will tell you it's just a job, or you'll find something better. But you lost more than a paycheck. You lost your daily sense of purpose, professional relationships, the version of yourself who knew exactly what they were doing. Or what about becoming a mother, which is such a profound example of complex grief because you're simultaneously celebrating and grieving. You're grieving your old body, your old identity, your autonomy, your sleep, your spontaneity, your career trajectory, and even your relationship with your partner the way that it was. Or maybe you're grieving the expectations you held about motherhood in contrast with the reality of what your motherhood experience has been like. And you're supposed to be purely joyful about it because you have this beautiful baby, but you're allowed to grieve who you were while loving who you're becoming. Complex grief has some specific patterns you might recognize. You have this intense yearning for what you lost that doesn't go away, even after a year or more. You feel like your life has no meaning without what you lost. You're either avoiding all reminders or you can't stop seeking them out. The thoughts about the loss feel as fresh and painful as they did in the beginning. You feel like a part of you died with the loss. And often, you're stuck in the loop of what if and if only. What if I had left sooner? What if I had seen the signs? If only I had done something differently. You keep circling around the same painful thoughts instead of moving through them. People will say, time heals all wounds, but this is the grief that needs more than time. It needs specific support. It needs specific strategies because the normal process of grieving has gotten derailed by complications. So if you're relating to what I'm saying here, it doesn't mean that you are broken or doing it wrong. It means your grief has layers that are too heavy to carry alone. And that's exactly what we're going to address with these 7 strategies I'm sharing with you today. Strategy number 1 is to stop performing your grief. Release yourself from any pressure to grieve correctly and give yourself permission to grieve authentically, even if it's messy. Maybe you're a new mom posting beautiful nursery photos while privately crying because you don't recognize your body or your life. The biggest thing I had to learn when I lost my brother was that I didn't have to be a good griever for anyone. And grief looks different for us all. And reading all the books or doing all the right things won't work if those aren't the right things for you. High achievers, perfectionists, eldest daughters, people who've built entire identities around being capable, we're used to working hard at things and seeing results. We think if we just apply enough effort, we can fast forward our way to being healthy again. But performing your way through grief just adds exhaustion on top of devastation. You're managing other people's comfort while your own grief goes unwitnessed and unprocessed. This is why you're so tired, because you're crying in your car before work. You're waking up with your pillowcase soaked, and you're wondering why being strong for everyone else is making you feel like you're dying inside. Stop trying to act like you're unaffected. The only way you can grieve well is to grieve the way that you need to. The grief process isn't a checklist to go through, it's a process. Your grief may show up differently every single day. So start saying no to things that require you to perform being okay. If someone invites you somewhere and you don't have the energy to put on a brave face, practice saying, I'm not up for that right now, but I really appreciate you thinking of me. You don't owe anyone an elaborate explanation. I'm having a hard day is a complete sentence. For high achievers especially, this means releasing yourself from the timeline you think you're supposed to have with your grief. So often when I'm working with clients dealing with grief, they often say something like, oh, it's already been a year, I should be over it by now. And I always stop and correct them and say, it's only been a year. That's still so fresh and you've come so far, but it's normal for healing to take a while. You might need more time than you think is reasonable. You might need more time than other people think is reasonable. That doesn't mean you're failing. It just means there's no universal timeline when it comes to grief. The second strategy is to let your grief speak. Give your grief somewhere to go. A journal, a support group, Reddit, and ideally with more than one person, unless they're a professional. When grief carries multiple layers, shame, trauma, conflicting emotions, these complicated feelings have nowhere to go. You can't talk about them at dinner parties. So they just keep swirling inside you, waiting for a chance to come out. So here's what you can do. Pick one small ritual you can do when grief feels too big. Light a candle and sit with it for 5 minutes. Go for a walk and Maybe talk your feelings out loud. Write letters that you may never send. Create a playlist of songs that capture what you lost and let yourself cry through it once a week. Spend Sunday evenings journaling about what you're grieving. The ritual doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It just gives you a chance to give the feeling somewhere to go. For me, it was powerful to simply name what I was experiencing as grief. I'm grieving the loss of my brother to suicide. And that's what these rituals do. They take the formless, overwhelming feelings and give them shape and containment. The third strategy is to lean into your support network. This is surprisingly hard for high achievers who are used to being the helper, but not the person being helped. You know that scene in movies where there's like a character who's had a really bad day, and so they go straight to the freezer and pull out a big tub of ice cream, and they just take a spoon and just have at it? I always say to my clients, this is the time to give yourself permission to eat the ice cream. But what this really means is that it's time to let yourself be the helped and not the helper, and to really recognize that what you're going through is serious and deserves extra care. So it's time to cash in favors. It's time to vocalize what you need and ask someone to bring you dinner or meet you for coffee so you can cry. If this is especially hard for you, try finding a designated person to organize everyone else around you to support you. Let them be the main point of contact to organize meal trains, etc. All you have to do is accept the love. Which reminds me, do not see receiving this help as a sign that you're weak, as high achievers often do. Instead, choose to see it as you're choosing to let love in and that it's healthy and good for you to receive this. High achievers, especially oldest daughters and people who've always been the responsible ones, we're used to being the person others lean on. We're capable, competent, the one who holds it all together. So when we're the ones falling apart, it feels wrong. We think we should be able to handle this ourselves. But complex grief with all those layers, it's too big to carry completely alone. And this is why you can feel isolated even when people are reaching out. Nobody is seeing the real grief. They're only seeing the version you've decided they can handle. Find a therapist who specializes in grief or trauma. Professional support can help you process the layers in a way that's hard to do alone. Or identify one safe person in your life, someone who can handle big feelings without trying to fix them. Or find a support group for your specific type of loss. Being in a room with people who understand your exact loss means you can finally say it plainly. No editing, no protecting anyone from the truth. That witnessing, that being fully seen in your grief, is healing in a way nothing else quite is. The fourth strategy is to own your grief story, because shame is a story that we don't have to own. Maybe you were fired or laid off and you're carrying shame about not being good enough. So you edit your LinkedIn to make it sound mutual. You avoid networking events because what do you do feels like a landmine. Every time you edit your grief for other people, you're carrying their discomfort on top of your own devastation. And that's what's actually breaking you. But being fired doesn't have to be a story about you not being good enough. Someone's suicide doesn't have to be your story of shame. And you can love motherhood and resent certain aspects of it, and it doesn't mean the story is that you're a bad mom. Identify alternative storylines besides the one in your head. Shame is a story we don't have to own. It tells you that what happened reflects that you're unworthy. But their suicide isn't a reflection of you. The abuse wasn't your fault. Great employees get fired all the time. It's not always a reflection of your work or worth. Most mothers have many positive and negative feelings about motherhood, and that's completely normal. You get to choose what beliefs you hold about your grief, and it doesn't have to be a bad reflection of you. Find one space where you can say it plainly. A therapist's office, a support group specifically for your type of loss. One trusted friend who won't flinch. Notice how it feels to talk about your grief out loud. The first time might feel impossible. The 10th time might still be hard, but something shifts when you stop carrying that secret and when you let the truth exist in the open air. You don't have to tell everyone, by the way. You get to choose who knows and how much you share. But having at least one space where you can be completely honest about all of it is essential for processing complex grief. I know today's topic is heavy, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge my sponsor, Therapy Notes. As a therapist, I used to dread the admin side of my practice, billing, scheduling notes. It felt like it was stealing time from what I actually love doing. And that's why I'm so grateful for Therapy Notes. It handles all the business stuff seamlessly, and their new Therapy Fuel AI can draft progress notes in seconds. It's given me more time to focus on building real connections with my clients and creating content like this. If you're a therapist who wants to spend more time on what matters to you, check out Therapy Notes using my code Dr. Therese for a free 2-month trial. And you can also click on the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to it. The fifth strategy is to build your grief menu and have a plan, because feeling out of control when you feel triggered by grief can feel really uncomfortable for a high achiever. So while you may not control when the feelings come, you can control how prepared you are for them. And the thing about grief is, you know how it shows up whenever it wants, and it often shows up at the worst possible times. You're crying in the frozen fruit aisle because someone smelled like your ex, or you're sobbing in your car because you heard a song that reminded you of them. And then you'll be fine for weeks, and then it happens all over again. You'll see a job posting for your old role and you can't breathe. The randomness of how grief works feels like losing control. And for perfectionists who've built lives on being in control, that can feel almost as scary as the grief itself. And this is where having a grief menu helps. Make a list of things you can do when you feel those swells of grief and sadness. Take a walk, phone a friend, do your grief workbook or read your grief book, journal, watch a comfort show, go to the gym, do some stretching or yoga. Give yourself permission to take a break from screens for 30 minutes. When grief blindsides you, just notice. Don't judge it or analyze it in the moment, just notice it. Over time, you might start to connect the dots. Oh, Sundays are hard because that's when we used to talk. The third week of every month is rough. That's when I was laid off. Spring is hard because that's when we had our best memories together. Once you start recognizing patterns, you can plan ahead. Not to avoid the grief, you can't, but to be gentler with yourself during those times. This practice shifts grief from feeling like a constant ambush to feeling like something that you can work with. You're not controlling it, you're learning its rhythms. You're building a relationship with your grief instead of being at war with it. And here's something important. Grief doesn't always have to be the enemy. It can be a welcome friend that's a reminder that you're missing what you lost and that you had something that mattered, or a reminder that you had something worth missing. Okay, quick question. I'm genuinely curious. What's the most unexpected thing that's triggered your grief? Was it the way someone laughed? A LinkedIn notification? Seeing your old jeans in the closet? If you're up for it, drop a comment and let me know. Sometimes it helps to know we're all not alone in the randomness of it all. All right, the next strategy is probably the one that's the hardest for high achievers. Adjust your expectations. You know how every time you catch yourself laughing, you feel immediate guilt? How you can't have fun without this voice asking, what kind of person enjoys themselves when someone they love is gone? Or how can I be happy when they're probably out there hurting someone else? You treat happiness like you're betraying what you lost, like every moment of lightness is evidence that it didn't matter enough. Here's what you need to understand. It's normal to feel guilt. That doesn't mean it's your fault. It's normal to not just jump right back into work and hit your targets the way that you used to. Grief is a whole body experience, and your computer wouldn't run normally with 100 windows open. So why do you expect your brain to when you're processing grief and doing all the other things that you do in your life? Things will be slower and harder than they used to be for a while, and that's a normal part of grief. As much as you want to jump back into your normal life, it's good to slow down and accept a season of a slowed pace, which allows your body and your mind to recuperate so that you can come back stronger. You think that honoring what you lost means staying stuck in grief forever. You think that if you move forward, if you laugh, if you build a good life, it means you've forgotten or it didn't matter enough. But that's not how healing works. You're already carrying the weight of grief, which is heavy enough, and then you're adding the weight of guilt on top of it every time something good happens. You're punishing yourself for being alive and for continuing to experience the fullness of being human. When joy shows up, instead of immediately shutting it down with guilt, pause, notice it. Say to yourself, this is how I honor what I lost, by living the kind of life that makes grief worth carrying, because it means I had something worth losing. and then let yourself have the moment of joy. So here's something that you can actually do. The next time you laugh or feel lightness in the middle of your grief, tell yourself, I'm healing. Because you are, because being able to have a moment of lightness or levity means that there's a small part of you that has space for the good. You're retraining your brain to understand that living doesn't dishonor what you lost or your pain. It honors the fact that it existed and it mattered. Let yourself enjoy the good. Say yes when a friend invites you over for dinner. Every small moment of pleasure you allow yourself without self-punishment is practice for living a full life alongside your grief. The seventh strategy, and this is the big one, is to let grief change you instead of destroy you. You're not who you were before this loss, and you never will be again. And here's the truth. Accepting this is much easier than fighting it. Everything we experience, good or bad, it's always changing us. We're changing every day. Yet so often I see so many people fight and try to go back to a version of themselves that they were before the grief ever came along. Instead, you can welcome the new version of you. After all, she's you, but with more strength and wisdom. Before this happened, maybe you thought if you just worked hard enough, planned well enough, stayed in control, you could prevent bad things from happening. Maybe you built your whole identity around being capable and having it together. The person with the impressive job title, the person in the relationship, the person who had it all figured out. And then this loss came and shattered all those illusions about control and certainty. So what if you let your grief transform you rather than destroy you? Grief cracks us open. It breaks down the walls that we've built and the stories we've told ourselves about who we are and how the world works. And yes, that breaking is painful. But in that cracked open space, there's also an opportunity to rebuild differently, to build a life based on what actually matters to you and not what you think you're supposed to be doing. Maybe losing someone has made you braver about taking risks because you've already survived something devastating. Maybe leaving an abusive relationship has taught you what you will and won't tolerate and has shown you your own strength. Maybe losing your job has forced you to separate your worth from your productivity, and it's given you space to figure out what you actually want. Maybe becoming a mother has shown you what you're capable of, and it's clarified what actually matters versus what you thought mattered before. This is why you might notice yourself changing in ways you didn't expect. Invite yourself to ask, who do I want to be in the face of grief? How do I want to show up on the other side of this? What's this grief teaching me about what matters? What small change could I make that would honor what I've learned? If I stopped living for other people's approval, what would I do differently? What would it look like to build a life that makes grief worth carrying? The answers might be big. I'm going to quit my corporate job and train for something completely different. Or I'm going to set boundaries I've never set before. Or I'm going to stop pretending motherhood is only beautiful and start being honest about how hard it is. My brother's death made me braver. It made me move to a new city and eventually a new country. It made me leave my comfortable way of life to embrace a remote lifestyle I could only have dreamt of. It made me care less about the approval of others and care more about building a life I felt proud of living. And while I would love to bring him back if I could, I'm also immensely grateful for the person his death helped me to become. You get to let this grief change you. You get to let it reshape your priorities, your relationships, your entire life. And that's not dishonoring what you lost. That's taking what you've learned and building something meaningful from these broken pieces. The life you build on the other side of this loss can be more meaningful because of what you've learned. That's how you transform grief into something other than destruction. Before we wrap, I want to leave you with a few affirmations. If these feel good, take them with you this week. And if they don't land, skip forward. There's no pressure. My grief is proof that something or someone mattered deeply. There's no such thing as being good at grieving. Grief is just this hard, and I'm doing the best I can. I can let this grief transform me instead of destroy me. If this conversation resonated with you, I want to invite you to join my newsletter community. Every week, I share insights like this, practical wisdom for high achievers who want to stop just surviving and start building lives they actually love. And you can find the link to sign up in the show notes. Believe it or not, we're coming up on the end of season 1. And next week is the finale, and it's a big one. We're putting together everything we've covered this season and talking about what it actually means to build a life you don't need to escape from. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. But for now, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for showing up, for being willing to look at the hard stuff with me. And also, if there's a topic you're hoping I'll cover in future episodes, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And remember what I said at the beginning. Grief can't be optimized or performed. It can only be carried. Complex grief isn't supposed to follow anyone's timeline, but it does require a lot of support, honesty, letting yourself feel your feelings, and especially to let yourself laugh. And you're not too broken, too sensitive, too slow, or too stuck to build a good life after this loss. You've got to be willing to be messy, to not have it figured out, to need more time than you think is reasonable. And that's how healing actually happens, in small, imperfect steps, not perfect performance. Thank you so much for checking in with me today. I'll see you next week for the season finale.